Welcome to Mentoring in Real Life, where we talk about what it takes to find and be a great mentor. I'm Angela, and together with my co-host Bill, we know the power of mentoring and what it can do in your life on both sides of the table. If you're interested in learning tips, tricks, and hearing stories about mentoring, you're in the right place. Come join us. Well, hey Bill, how you doing?
Well, I've never been this happy. How about you?
I'm tippy tappy, the song in my heart.
Awesome.
So, Bill, I have been reading a book. It's a somewhat popular book right now called The Art of Spending Money by a guy named Morgan Housel. Have you heard of him?
Only through you.
Okay. Well, I was reading this book, and it's really aimed towards getting to financial freedom as quickly as possible, which is a huge passion of mine. And it actually helped influence why I was able to take early retirement from the government, for example, is because of long-term planning on my side for getting to financial freedom as quickly as possible, alongside my husband, of course.
And clearly it answers why you're doing this podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
And when I was reading it, there were some messages from it that I really saw as being very parallel to the work that we're doing on this podcast. And specifically, this concept of not being judgmental on how people spend money, as that comes from their background and their history, right? So if we're not judgmental on how people spend money, I started thinking to myself, well, what about the judgment that sometimes happens on people's career goals, on how they define what career success looks like? And how does that align to mentoring, and both from the mentor's perspective and the mentee's perspective, and just how each person is really unique on what contributes to their own well-being and their peace of mind, and how that's true in personal finance as well as career aspirations.
yeah, I would totally agree. And in fact, obviously there probably is a relationship between career well-being and financial well-being at some level. So, I mean, certainly as a mentor, it's incredibly important not to be judging that person's goals based on what the mentor thinks are good goals for the mentor. Well, that's not how I did my career. Well, who cares about how you did your career? We're not talking about your career. We're talking about the mentee's career. And so certainly you're going to help them through this process, but you're not going to tell them what they should be doing. And so, yeah, it fits very well into the same conversation about resisting the urge to judge their goals because they aren't the same as the mentor's goals. And so there's a balance that goes on between pushing and encouraging, reaching for higher levels, and particularly when that comes from the mentor saying, I think this individual doesn't seem to have the confidence or the knowledge to achieve that, but the mentor may see there's additional potential for the mentee. So it's not judging the goals, but you might be helping them expand their viewpoint about where those goals might be, what might be a good fit for them as they go forward.
Yeah, like they might say that they only see themselves reaching one particular level, but you as the mentor know that they are capable of more, and opening up that door for them or those options for them and making them aware that that is even possible, and also balancing that with that role or title or level in an organization may not align with their own personal happiness. And so it's a balance there, not being judgmental as a mentor for that, right? That's what
Absolutely. It's balance for their life, not balance for your life as the mentor. And so
yeah.
helping them work through those issues very much in a coaching fashion, but the mentor typically brings some wisdom that comes from being around longer, and they can sort of help see a longer view for the mentee without picking goals for them or without picking what's right for them. They certainly can help them get there own goals aligned with what works for them and what they would like to do in their careers and their lives.
Yeah. And I think from a mentor's perspective, it's just making sure that the mentee has all of the information that in making informed decisions. So it's really getting an understanding about the ending, the 7 habits again, start with the end in mind.
Thank you so
Right?
much. I'm a big fan of the habit two there, so that's a good one.
So starting with the end in mind, what is the mentee's desires? What do they want? At the end of the mentee's career, what would make them proud of their accomplishments and path that they've chosen? And if the mentee's goal is a specific role, then the mentor helps them be realistic on how to get there. So if their goal is to be CEO, then that means they've got to get outside of being in a technical position. They've got to build the skills and the experience to be prepared for that role, right?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Certainly in my life as a mentor, there were people who would say, I want to do this or I want to do that. And they say, well, okay, so here are all the steps along the way that you need to accomplish. Oh, I don't want to do those roles. Okay, well, there's going to be some choices that you get to make. And, to make it a sort of make a finer point on it. Obviously, if you want to be the CEO, but you don't ever want to manage anything, you just want to go from being a technical worker at some level and saying, but someday I really want to be the CEO. I just don't want to ever have to manage people, or I don't want to have to worry about finance. Okay, well, we should chat about that a little longer, because those are pieces of the role for the CEO. And I know that sort of sounds like a dumb example, but there are people who, in my experience, haven't really thought through all of the things they need to do to get to the position they say they want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And so making sure they understand the skills that they're going to have to develop and the likely types of positions they'll have to get along the way is something that the mentor can provide, and help them approach these new goals that they have with very open eyes about what's going to be expected along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one way a mentor can really help with that is to talk to the mentee and say, you are a whole person, right? Break up your life into sections and phases of your life. What do you want your whole life to look like in each phase? Because the truth of the matter is, if you're saying yes to something, that means you're saying no to something else. Unfortunately, you and I both know this well, time and energy are finite resources. They're not infinite. And so there's only so much room for yeses in one's world.
Absolutely. And, both you and I had a predecessor who told me many times that early in her life, her kids were she had a young family, and she made choices along the path to say, okay, in the early parts, I'm not going to be managing large organizations because time and energy are finite. And so I'm going to make sure that I have the time and energy for my kids earlier in my life. And as they grow and then they become more independent, I'll have more time and energy that I can devote to career goals that I have. And it didn't hurt her. In fact, it put her in a place where her life maintained balance throughout, and the balance shifted throughout. And the person I'm talking about was my predecessor as the executive director of a very large organization. So she had a pretty successful career, as it turns out, but she also had a very successful parenting life because she managed the balance throughout the evolution of her career and her life.
Yeah, it sounds like she recognized that her life was going to be in phases. And so she took one phase in being more focused on her family. And then as they got older, her phase shifted to being more focused on her career.
Absolutely. So it didn't hurt her. I would suggest that it helped her quite a bit, instead of trying to do everything for everybody all at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's not a recipe for success. It's a recipe for disaster for you personally, because, as you said a few minutes ago, time and energy are finite. You just don't have all the time and energy on the planet for everything that you might ever do all at once.
Right. Another parallel that I found in the book is Morgan Housel talked a lot about people spending money to impress people, right? There's people who spend money on cars or clothes or their zip code or their jewelry, right? To not really because it fulfills them, but because it's status, right? It's a symbol to other people. And I noticed a parallel, I thought about a parallel that can be true as well for people chasing a title in the workplace. Those people could be more focused on impressing other people than they are necessarily with being fulfilled with the title itself. And so what would a mentor do when recognizing that may be the mentee's perception?
Well, yeah, I think that's an important conversation. So we've talked about it before. An important part of starting the mentoring relationship is doing a lot of listening about what the mentee is passionate about, and what are the things they like to do, what are the things they want to do. Really, not just what role do I want to have because that sounds like a really good role to me. I want to be the department head, but I don't really like dealing with people all that much. Okay, well, I might pull on that thread a little bit if I'm mentoring and saying, do you recognize that the more senior you go in the management chain, the more people you would be managing? That's going to be part of that job. And so how do you think you'll be able to handle that portion of the job if you don't want to deal with people? And that's not to say that if you're not a people person right this instant that you couldn't develop that set of skills. So I'm not talking people out of it at the very beginning. What we're talking about is what are the things that you want to do? What are you passionate about? And what are the skills that you want to develop so that you can do these future jobs that we're talking about? And not for the purpose of, so I can say I was the department head one time. It's for the purpose of doing good things for yourself and for the organization. If you're not doing it for the good of the organization, then I would, as a mentor, I probably would start to pull at those threads pretty hard. Just filling a block or just doing something for status is where we started this part of the conversation, and not with the purpose of actually making things better for the organization, for the customers of the organization. If you're not thinking those kind of thoughts, then I'm going to pull hard at whether or not that's the right job for you to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So from a mentoring perspective, it's really the mentee who defines career goals, not the mentor. And that said, though, how those goals get clarified and strengthened is very much a shared process between both the mentor and the mentee. So let's talk a little bit about how those roles typically break down. What do you, Bill, see as the mentee's role as the goal owner?
Right. So just to clarify from what I was saying a minute ago, the mentee is going to own their career direction and their decisions. When I said I'm going to pull really hard at it, I'm going to help pull at threads where I think they haven't really thought it all the way through. But I'm not going to tell them what decision they need to make. I'm going to make sure they know they own all those decisions and the consequences of all those decisions. They get to own all of that. And so I'm going to make sure that I help them to articulate for them what success, fulfillment, and growth mean in their lives and for them, not for me, but for them. And so they're going to choose what goals they're going to pursue, and they're going to choose when they adjust those things. They're going to own the whole process, start to finish. And, even if it turns out as they're going through, I as the mentee, I'm not really sure what I want to do. The uncertainty that you're going to get to work through, you get to own that as the mentee as well. The mentor's there to help you through it, but never to make the decisions for you. Never.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that idea of the mentee still owning the goal, but the mentor helping to facilitate it. So as the mentor's role, as the facilitator, but not really the decider of the goals, what do you see as the mentor bringing to the table then?
Sure. So I think that, and I'm expecting you'll comment, because I'm going to start off with saying you're playing coach for a lot of this, the goal setting. You're helping ask lots of questions to help them clarify what their goals are going to be. You can challenge their assumptions. You can challenge things that the mentor may see as blind spots. and even share perspectives or experience, and recognize the paths that they're going down and say, I'm going to help you translate what you say you want to do into realistic options and what are the steps to get to those places. So I'm going to support your accountability without telling you what I think that path needs to be or trying to make you follow a path that I follow. That's crazy talk. So, for example, here's 3 directions I've seen people take from where you are. Which one of those resonates with you? And certainly not, this is the role you should be aiming for in the next 3 years. And I'll sort of caveat that last one. If you say you wanted these other things, and we're clear about that, then there may be certain roles I'll say, well, then you need to make these roles part of your growth path on the way to that, because your company or your organization has either a written or unwritten requirement that you must do such and such a job. You must be a branch head before you're a division head. You must be a division head before you're a department head. And even those rules, as it turns out, are, at least in our experience, none of those are written in stone. But a lot of them, if you look at the paths that people who have achieved the goals you want to achieve, you will find that they've taken on a certain set of roles all along that path. And so as a mentor, you might be recommending some set of similar positions to achieve the goals they want to achieve. But
and that's not unique to our organization.
of course not.
From experiences that I've talked to about people who are outside of our DoD bubble entirely. It's very similar, right? In order to advance in other career fields, oftentimes it requires getting a breadth of experience that it just is, right? It's very rare for a person to stay in one lane and then take a more senior role in a different lane or above them where they haven't had exposure and experience in building skill set outside of their primary lane. It's very rare for that to happen.
I agree. And so I'm not here to tell anybody that they could never, ever jump past some of those roles, because I'm sure you can show me some examples, small numbers of examples where people skipped over all those things. And if you want to try it that way, as a mentor, I'm not going to tell you you can never do it that way. But as a mentor, I'm going to share experience and say, these are the paths that have achieved success for lots of people before you. Your choice as to which path you want to follow. You want to choose the path that says, I'm going to go from, new employee to CEO in a week. Feel free to choose that path. I'm not guaranteeing you success along that path. And so, it's not, I'm not trying to be cavalier about it. The mentor can't tell somebody, you must do those things or you'll never get that you'll never achieve that goal. I'm not recommending that strong of an opinion about it, but you certainly want to bring your experience to the table and say, here's the paths that seem to be successful. And you you can look at any number of people across the organization who have achieved what you want to achieve, and you can look at the paths they've followed.
Yeah. And so if the mentee's responsibility is to own the goals and the mentor's responsibility is to help, them define the goals in an influential way, when is it appropriate for mentors to influence goals?
Yeah, the example that comes to mind very strongly is when a mentee comes to me and says, I have this goal to be one level up from where I am right now. And there's nothing wrong with that goal, obviously, as a short-term goal. But I have found in my experience that I could often see more potential in the mentee than the mentee saw in themselves. And so I'm happy to influence their goal setting to say, that's a great short-term goal, but look, you could be the big boss someday. Okay. And, if that's something that appeals to you, then I'm happy to help you lay out a path that gets you not just to this next level, but a path for the rest of your career that you will adjust as time goes by. But please don't set your sights so low that, you set the bar so high that you step over it. Okay. I mean, let's set some long-term goals that are going to require some work and some real achievement. But maybe if you suddenly see, wow, You mean you think I could do those real big jobs? Yeah, of course I do. And I don't. And again, that's not a cavalier thought. I recently attended a retirement party for somebody who'd been around a long time, and what was very, very powerful during that party was the number of people who stood up and said, in their comments at the end about the person's career, you saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And I want to thank you for the incredible influence you've had on my career. It's like, wow, okay, I wish I could have captured those moments for our podcast, because it was powerful to have people very emotionally saying how much they appreciated somebody seeing something in them that they didn't see for themselves.
Yeah. You used the word could, and I want to dive into that a little bit,
Sure.
because it is much more powerful for a mentor to use that language. You could be the big boss someday. You could be executive director. In your case, these are words that you have said. But you didn't say should. You should be the boss. You should be reaching for X role or Y title, right? It's much more powerful for the individual to hear you could rather than you should. And part of that is because should is could with shame. Like the idea then is, oh, if Bill tells me I should be the ED someday, but God, it's not a job I want, then I feel bad. I feel bad if I don't aspire to the role that you see me as having potential in. But when you say you could be the executive director someday, that's opening my eyes. That's opening my concept, my aperture about what is possible for my career. What
Right.
experience have you had in that?
Well, so I didn't think about it as I was saying it. You could be the big boss someday. If I say you should be the big boss someday, then I violated the earlier rules we talked about, which was I'm not the one who owns those goals, and I shouldn't be setting those goals. Those are not my goals to set. The mentee owns the goals. And so when I'm trying to influence somebody, I'm not trying to take ownership of the goals that they want to achieve. I would love to help them, and I want to help them see potential for themselves. But the goals are theirs to make and theirs to pursue. And so for me, I can't imagine it working well for somebody to try to achieve some goal that I set for them.
Yeah.
They need to be setting those and owning those for themselves.
Yeah. Another way a mentor can be really influential in goal setting is helping to refine vague goals. Like if I came to you and said, I want to lead, Bill, how would you respond to that?
Yeah. So it's great that you want to lead, but we should pull that thread a little bit further. You could be leading in any given moment. If you say, hey, Bill, I got a good idea, and I say, that's a good idea, let's do that. Okay, that's a leadership event. You've said something, and you now gained a follower. Now I'm following you. Okay, you led. Are you good? Are we done? Or no, I want to lead a bigger part of the organization. Okay, let's talk about that. How big are we talking about? Would you like to be a branch head? Would you like to be a division head? Would you like to own the company? When you say you want to lead, what do you mean by that? And so pull the threads that way, as opposed to just saying I want to lead, because you could lead for the moment. Is that good enough for you? And generally speaking, when you're having a career conversation, I'm betting they would say, I didn't mean it that way, Bill. Okay, good. Let's talk about what you did mean. And you're going to tell me what you mean. I'm not going to tell you what you meant. So that's the way I would try to pull that thread a little bit to get them to think about what they really mean when they say, I want to lead someday, Bill.
Yeah. Well, and then when you get more refinement of those goals, then the mentor helps put some reality tests into the timeline, right? When do you, like you said earlier, if you want to go from individual contributor to a CEO in a week, good luck with that. That's not a realistic timeline, right? So it's helping to insert some realistic timelines and what those trade-offs will be in setting those particular goals and going into them eyes wide open. Because again, going back to the idea of saying yes to something means saying no to something else. So the mentor helping the mentee recognize what the trade-offs are on the direction that they want to take, and also what their risks might be and what they might be saying no to because of that.
Absolutely true. So, and I would suggest that's trade-offs and risks, not just at work, but in life. And so we hinted at it, or we talked about it a little bit earlier. Choices you're making about what time you're going to have for your family, and what time you're going to have for work, and so forth. And so, working through that, and again, passing no judgment at all on what the mentee's decisions are, only making sure that they've thought through the consequences of those decisions, the trade-offs that they will be making. And if they're okay with that, that's great. And so we're back to the original thought. This is not a judgmental discussion. I'm passing no judgment, but I certainly would like to help you think through the decisions you want to make and what are the consequences of those decisions, both intended and unintended consequences of making any given decision.
Yeah. As a synopsis of this, it really just reminds me that the mentee really sets the destination for their career, and the mentor helps with the map on how to get there, with the directions on how to get there.
I think that's a terrific summation.
Yeah. What have we missed in this conversation?
I would love to tell you, I think you missed a bunch of stuff because I'd like to give you a hard time, but I think you did a really nice job, Angela.
Well, thank you, Bill. And thank you for listening to this episode of Mentoring in Real Life. If you have thoughts or questions, feel free to leave us a comment or send us an email, which we've included in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with a friend. Until next time, help others climb.